So sometimes we get confused about a number of things, right? So I'm doing a session and folks are engaged and we're playing some activities, some hands-on and scenario kind of stuff. And so um, one of the activities was this activity where you share things. And so I asked people, they were given a bunch of different cards, so the playing cards. And so they're looking for people who are like them or not like them, right? So they're supposed to get into groups of four with similar cards. And those are all the directions they get. That's it, similar cards. Well, the interesting thing is that people start self-selecting using a number of different methods of selecting their small groups. And so there's probably, I don't know, about 150 people in the group or whatever. And so people are self-selecting. And so the thing I found most interesting is that the thing that they had in common in doing this activity is that they all had cards. But then they, for whatever reason, didn't think that that was enough. So they started self-selecting along these other criteria. So it was quite interesting to watch this kind of social dynamic play out, right? So, and we do this on a regular basis. And it was really interesting that at one point, one group had members, and they started to turn people away and say, we got ours. So we got ours. You have to go find your own. And again, going back to my point that the everybody had cards, so they could have gotten into groups, and some groups went from 4 to 8 to 16, and they made larger groups or whatever. So it was just interesting how that played out. But one of the things I think is indicative, particularly in Western society and in the United States in particular, is this notion of the rugged individual, right? And that I can pull myself up by my bootstraps, that meritocracy works, and I have to, and that's what I operate from. And I'd like for us to think about that in a different kind of way, because in other places outside the United States, people live in they have different relationships with that, right? So competition looks and acts and feels different in other places outside the United States. But here we have this kind of rugged individualism, and I think sometimes that blocks us from actually being helpful. Um, I remember I was at it was one of my first times in Arizona, and pardon me if I've told this story before or if you've heard this story before, but it was one of my first times in Arizona, and I saw that they had these trees, and they have orange trees everywhere, and I was just fascinated. I'm a young guy from Ohio, first time in Arizona. I see all these things, so I start sneaking these oranges in my backpack. And I'm a little timid because I'm not sure if you're supposed to do this or not, right? Because they're just laying out on the floor, on the ground everywhere. And so I pop them in. And so later that evening, I go to my hotel room and I'm looking at these oranges, and I'm looking at this bounty of all these oranges. And these things are like the size of grapefruit. And so I go to peel them, and I start to recognize some oddities about peeling them. Like the peel itself is about this thick, so the orange is about the small size of a small golf ball or whatnot. And so I'm doing this, and I'm like, wow, this is weird. And then I actually quartered it, and I got all the peels and the little vines off and whatnot, and I popped it in my mouth, and it was the most disgusting orange I have ever eaten. Absolutely disgusting. I'm like, I couldn't spit it out fast enough, right? Um, and then I recognized that this wasn't fruit. It wasn't fruit. So then I kind of backed up, just in my own mind. I'm like, okay, so this wasn't fruit. This was for decoration. It was for whatever, which is why it was on the ground, because nobody can eat it because it's not fruit. And so I started thinking about, what is fruit? Fruit is something that trees produce that other entities can use, be it humans or animals or whatever. It has to be of use to someone else. And if it's not useful to someone else, then it is not fruit. It is not beneficial. It doesn't help anybody. Um, looking at that analogy even further, if I took the orange juice of a tree, an orange tree, for example, and I fed it right back to the tree exclusively, no water, just straight orange juice, what would be the destiny of that orange tree? It would die, right? It wouldn't fare well. It would suffer. It would be puny. And so a lot of times we think that our gifts and our talents, the medical schools that we've gone to, the higher education institutions, the trade schools, the things that we've accomplished by our own hands are actually to benefit us. And I would suggest that that is partially true. But if they are only exclusively benefiting us, then they are not fruit and they are off purpose. They're not helping anybody. And so when we think about how we're effective, when we think about how we engage with communities, when we engage with folks, the question really is not, how do I help those people, but how do I use my gifts and talents to help them navigate their world? Is it possible that many of us have gone through educational systems and accomplished things through in tasks and whatnot, to actually be able to provide information to other people about how they can make better decisions in their own lives, right? And so our fruit is not for us. And I would encourage you that if you're not using your gifts and your talents for the improvement of other people, then you are fruitless. My name is Andre Koen. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll catch you next time. All right. Bye.